Never was drivers. It's something I've talked about twice already on this channel. It's the stories of drivers that in one way or another could have raced an IndyCar but never did. There's a multitude of stories like these that have popped up over the years, many of which coming from the world of F1. So in this special episode, I'd like to talk about some of the never was drivers from Formula 1. First up is 5-time Formula 1 world champion Manuel Fangio, a driver I've been meaning to talk about. Fangio is widely remembered for his success in the first decade of Formula 1, amassing 5 world championships in just 7 seasons, holding the title of the man with the most world championships in F1 from 1955 when he won his 3rd, taking the record from Alberto Ascari, all the way until 2003 when Michael Schumacher broke Fangio's record with his 6th championship. Fangio was a great driver, but as the case is with most Formula 1 drivers that attempt Indy, Fangio's time in America wasn't a bed of roses. He only attempted the Indy 500 once, that coming in 1958 as a bit of an accident. Fangio was there as a spectator, having recently retired from full-time racing that year. But while walking around the paddock, he was given an offer. Someone told him that they would give him $20,000 to try and qualify an Alfie-powered Curtis Craft into the race. Adjusted for inflation today, that would have been north of $200,000. At this point, some of you may be wondering what kind of madman would throw around that kind of money to put the reigning Formula 1 world champion in their car. Well, this man was George Walther Jr., the owner of the Dane Steel Foundry in Ohio. George had entry in the field, and was looking for a driver. Fangio hopped in the car, but the entry was not very competitive, and both Fangio and Walther walked away from the race. This would be Fangio's only attempt at the race, as he'd retire from racing for good after 1958. Moving on from one of the most remembered drivers of all time to one of the most forgotten, we have Roland Ratzenberger. Ratzenberger had missed out on racing for the Jordan Formula 1 team in their first year in the sport in 1991, and was seeking for refuge in other forms of motorsports. He would end up in sports cars and later Japanese F3000, but in the off-season between 1991 and 92, Ratzenberger nearly joined IndyCar. In late 1991, Ratzenberger tested an IndyCar twice, once at Laguna Seca, where he was only a few tenths of a second off of Michael Andretti, and once at Willow Springs, where he drove for Dick Simon Racing. Both tests were impressive, but Ratzenberger would never race in the series, having his eyes set firmly on Formula 1. Ratzenberger is a bit of an oddity in motorsports history, so drawing conclusions about how he would have done in the series if this move ever came to be is near on impossible. From one F1 rookie from the 94 season to another, let's talk about Heinz Frentzen. Only a few years into his career, a move from Formula 1 to kart was looking very likely for the German. These rumors came up in the summer of 1998, while Frentzen was struggling with the floundering reigning champions of Williams, with Frentzen himself coming off of a 5-race streak where he failed to see the checkered flag. In an interview with his hometown newspaper, Frentzen said in reference to kart, quote, "They offer a great sport, it's extremely exciting racing, and it would be an interesting new challenge to face." Unlike most of these what-ifs, we have a lot more information to go through than others, because this was definitely on the cards. The likely landing point for Frentzen would have been Team Rahal, replacing the owner himself, Bobby Rahal. Rahal was retiring at season's end, and the plan was to announce a new driver for the team by August. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, meanwhile, was quoted that his plans would be solidified by the end of August. Maybe this is just conjecture, but correlation definitely looked like an equal causation here. Frentzen was close to getting the deal done, but things fell through. Frentzen would move on to the Jordan F1 team in 1999, where he had one of, if not the best year of his career. As for Team Rahal, they would get a former F1 driver in Max Pappas to partner Brian Herta for the 99 season. Frentzen racing in IndyCar would have been a very interesting move, and seeing him in a Miller genuine draft car would have been awesome. Next up is Nelson Piquet Jr., who's looking into racing an IndyCar from the span of 2015 to 2016. Piquet had won the inaugural Formula E championship in early 2015, and made 2 Indy Lights starts later that summer. He was looking for a drive in IndyCar in 2016, an interest which was highly publicized at the time. However, this never came to be, with Piquet staying in Formula E for the next few years. Piquet is now outside the global racing limelight, racing in Brazilian stock cars. Who knows how different things would have been if Piquet ever got a shot in IndyCar. Now talk about a what if. Another F1 driver looking into IndyCar around the same time was Brendon Hartley. In late 2017, Hartley was mainly known as a sports car star for Porsche, but he had recently made a handful of starts for Toro Rosso and F1. But during his sports car years, a connection with a powerhouse team would nearly get him a ride in IndyCar. Brendon signed with Chip Ganassi at the 2016 Rolex 24 at Daytona, gave him a chance 2 years later to drive for the team in IndyCar. Had this came to be in the 2018 IndyCar season, he might have taken the 10 car that was eventually driven by Ed Jones. This never came to be, however, as Brendon Hartley signed for Toro Rosso full-time for the 2018 F1 season. It would be pretty cool to see Hartley race in the series even today. It really could happen too, with Hartley currently driving for Wayne Taylor, a team linked with Andretti Autosport. That'd be pretty awesome to see, even if it was just a one-off. Next is current Haas Formula 1 driver Nico Hulkenberg, who tested in IndyCar in the later half of 2021. Hulkenberg at this point had been without a full-time drive in F1 since 2019, and was serving as a reserve driver for Aston Martin. Hulkenberg would get a chance to drive for McLaren in the late October test at Barber Motorsports Park. Hulkenberg in the number 7 car was about second off of David Malukas, who set the fastest time in the test. Hulkenberg, speaking after the test, essentially shut the door of a future in the series, citing the physicality required to drive an IndyCar, along with his reluctance to drive on ovals. Had the test gone over well, the team reportedly offered him a chance to drive a third car in 2022, but this of course never materialized. This wasn't even the first rumor of Hulkenberg joining IndyCar either, as in late 2019, he was rumored to join Ed Carpenter Racing for the 2020 season. Hulkenberg seems pretty adamant about staying away from IndyCar, so this will probably never happen. Maybe his current F1 teammate Kevin Magnussen, who did race in IndyCar once for McLaren in 2021, could try to convince his teammates, but I have my doubts. Another driver that tested for McLaren in 2021 was one of their old F1 drivers, that being Stoffel Vandoorne. Vandoorne drove for the team during possibly their least competitive era, which made his 41-start F1 career a bit of a dud. Vandoorne left for Formula E shortly after the 2018 season, but in late 2021, some people are pointing Vandoorne towards IndyCar. On November 17, 2021, McLaren announced that Vandoorne would test for the team at Sebring in early December. The test would take place on December 6, 2021, and then it was radio silence for the most part. Nothing ever came of this, and Vandoorne hasn't tested in IndyCar after this. Vandoorne did say that he did enjoy the car, but besides that, there was and still is nothing more. Next up is Jack Aitken, and while he only made one Formula 1 start, I'm counting him in this video. It's another driver who is rumored for 2022, this time linked with 2 separate teams. The first team was AJ Foyt Racing. Foyt was trying to expand to 3 cars in 22, which is something they did until mid-Ohio when Rocket Phones withdrew their funding, ending the 11-car program, which was a shared ride with Tatiana Calderon and J.O. Hildebrand. In late 2021, he was linked with that car, and was also linked with Ed Carpenter Racing. Aitken actually tested for the team in the same test as Vandoorne, and was hopeful to get an opportunity in the series. Unfortunately for him, this opportunity hasn't come yet. However, he has found success in America, as he won this year's Sebring 12-hour with a Whelen Engineering team. This could still happen, but only time will tell if it does. Now to one of the most surprising drivers mentioned so far, we move on to Johnny Herbert. The 3-time Grand Prix winner only attempted one race, that being the 2002 Indy 500 when he practiced a number 32 car for Duesenberg Brothers Racing. Herbert did this after his one-race deal for Audi in the American Le Mans Series came to an end. Herbert had barely any track time, thanks to heavy rain which cancelled 8 total days of on-track action that month. During the month of May, Herbert found a drive in the American Le Mans Series, and soon left the Duesenberg Brothers team to drive for Champion Racing in the ALMS. His first start for the team came at Sonoma on the same day as Bump Day qualifying. Qualifying was unfortunately rained out, forcing the Duesenberg team and replacement driver Mimo Gidley to withdraw. In Sonoma it was dry, with Herbert and teammate Tom Christensen finishing a very respectable second. Herbert's driving days are now long gone, so a return to Indy will likely never happen. But his one, very short and very forgotten attempt is still very interesting to me. And to cap this video off, we have the perennial F1 bridesmaid, Chris Amon. Amon was a very talented racer, and was close to scoring multiple F1 wins, but never actually did. Despite not winning, Amon is still remembered fondly in racing circles, and is definitely on New Zealand's motorsports Mount Rushmore with Scott Dixon. But in the same way Dixon got close to F1 but never made it, Amon was close to racing in IndyCar, but was ultimately unsuccessful. Amon's one Indy shot came in 1970, where he failed to qualify with 3 cars, including the number 75 2005 McLaren. Chris Amon would never try the race again after this. I'm honestly very surprised how obscure this is. Barely anyone has talked about this before, and I'm not sure why. Is it obscure? Yes, definitely. But as I can attest to, some of the best racing stories come out of the shadows of the unknown. The support on this series has honestly been very overwhelming, so I'd like to thank all of you yet again for the support. If you have any drivers you'd like me to talk about in a future installment, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. On the right side of your screen, you'll see 2 cards, one to the last episode, and the other to the series playlist. Thank you all for watching, and have a great afternoon.